Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. And today we're going to be touching on a topic that comes up quite often. We're going to be talking about the difference or the importance between facts versus opinions. Anthony, how many times does this come up during the course of a week?
You know, it's very interesting. It's coming up more and more. And I think you actually kind of brought this up about how often do we rely on opinions for really all aspects of our life when we really need to be focused on facts.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's also important where those opinions are coming from.
Yeah. One of the reasons that we thought about this or brought this up is because I thought that the difference between facts and opinions really modeled like somebody's introduction to the infinite banking concept. Meaning that I think back about my journey of kind of being approached or kind of coming across infinite banking. And really when you start to dig into this is you're bombarded with a lot of opinions, right? So some of those opinions can be wrong. Some of them can be right, but there's also facts that are underlying that. And so really what our job to do as advisors is when someone gets introduced to infinite banking is to help people identify the difference between a fact and an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. Awesome. So today, let's do this. Let's go through. I'm going to throw some examples of facts or opinions, Anthony, and I want you to kind of tell us what do you think. What do you think that is? How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds good. Before we do that, because I know you're big on words. That words are important.
Yeah.
Let's talk about really what is the difference between a fact and opinion.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is an opinion?
Well, I'm going to cheat as we look this up right before it was. It's a belief that's held with confidence, but not substantiated by proof, right? And so this is something that you may have just heard from somebody else that kind of relayed some information, and that's how you kind of formed your opinion. And so, again, it's not something that's held in truth.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
How about an example of an opinion, like a financial opinion?
Oh, I was going to say an opinion would be that you have good hair.
Ooh.
That is not accurate. That's not a fact. Purely an opinion.
Okay, since you put me on the spot, you have good hair. Is that a fact or an opinion?
Oh, that's a fact, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Okay, all right. Okay, so speaking of fact, how are we defining a fact?
Fact would be knowledge that's based on real occurrences. So this has truth to it. So you dig into it. It's something that has truth as its foundation.
Yeah, and our ad a lot of times, because we get these confused a lot, right? And so if we want to achieve our goals, we need to know the difference between facts and opinions. And like, here's an example: is this investment is a good investment, right? That's obviously an opinion, right? But if it says that this property is going to rent out for $1,000 a month, and after expenses, your cash flow is going to be X, that's closer to a fact, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an estimate per se, because there could be some things going in and out, but like those are substantiated, right? It's based on a real occurrence. Like, I have a rental property, I have a tenant, the rent's going to be $950 a month.
Yeah.
Right? That is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether it ends up being a good investment or not, time will tell.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so back to this little game we're going to play.
Perfect. I'm going to throw some statements at you. I want you to tell me if they're an opinion or a fact. And if it's an opinion, maybe give us some truth that goes along with that.
Okay.
Fair enough? All right, perfect. First one I'm going to throw at you is the price of real estate always goes up.
Well, first of all, it says always, right? Or, I mean, always is always going to, I just use it again. But that's a prime example. If something's rarely something always going to happen.
Correct.
Right. So real estate is not always going to go up. In fact, I think you have a prime example for that, right? Because you bought some land.
Yeah.
And did it go up every year?
No. Thank you for bringing that up. No, it didn't. Right. And so like you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that a blanket statement with all or every, right, is typically it's going to be an opinion. And real estate is not always a great investment. And so the price of real estate always goes up is, in fact, an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Good one.
Second one. It takes time to make money.
That would definitely be an opinion.
Why would you say that?
Because it doesn't always take time to make money.
Yeah.
There are some abilities to make money fast, right? But we can't chase those fast deals. But sometimes you can make money quick.
Yeah.
And one thing we're probably going to talk about, or maybe it's in the next podcast we're prepping for, but we talked about when you have cash, opportunities are going to find you.
Yeah.
And if you're in that position where you have access to capital, when those opportunities come, you're going to be in a position to take advantage of it. And you may be able to make money quick.
Yeah.
And I've seen clients, particularly in whether they're flipping properties, or I've seen people flipping raw land, and they're making a lot of money within months.
I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
Literally, we had an event last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had guys from Casual Fridays that were on here talking about opportunities in there. And the example that they gave was one of their students, Josh, sent out a mailer, and on that first round of mailing made $1.8 million on that. Right?
That to me would be quick.
Certainly the exception, but right, it doesn't take time.
Right. But I just want to clarify with Josh, or whenever it did take time for him to learn. Right. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we're talking about different ways to determine between fact and opinion.
Awesome. Let's move on. Let's go to this next statement that you hear quite often. This one is, you should diversify your portfolio.
I think if you're invested in a volatile asset class, like say the stock market, you're going to have a lot going up and going down. And I think that's where this came from, right? We need to we need to spread our risk. But to me, I think that is opinion, because I think you should do the exact opposite. Is that you need to diversify when you're speculating.
Yeah.
Right. When you don't know if this is going to go up or this is going to go up, it's a gamble.
Yeah.
Hey, so let me just spread this out and see which one hits.
Yeah.
Then speculating, you should diversify. But if you're a true investor, meaning you're getting an education and you're learning this asset class. I mean, a lot of our true investors aren't really focusing on the market.
No.
Right. But even if you are in the stock market, if you can invest in certain assets that you know, then you should go all in. Right. But, and what I've found, I mean, we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago called the 5 levels of investors. Right. And typically where most people are getting to is that level 4 investor. That's where we're going to have that financial freedom, where that passive income is more than your monthly expenses. But if you look at how those people got there, it's not that, well, they're invested, they're flipping properties here, and then maybe they're buy and hold here, and they're lending money here, and then they have a business here. A lot of times they're starting out where they're laser focused.
Yeah.
Whatever that area that they're passionate about and they're learning about, they're going all in there. And they're buying the single families or they're flipping properties, but you want to be a specialist. So if anything, I think you actually need to do the opposite, that you need to specialize. But in order to do that, you do have to put the time in for the education. Yeah.
One thing I'll add is another way of communicating that same idea that you often hear is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I think that is advice that is typically given on the left side of the quadrant. If you're looking at that kind of the cash flow quadrant, is that's advice for people that are working, that have kind of a 401k, an IRA, something like that. But man, when you look at people on the right side, just like Anthony said, like you had mentioned, as a business owner and or an investor, is, man, they are typically very heavy in one area, one asset class, and they get really, really good at it. Right. So there's a big difference between the two of them. So a lot of times it's different advice for what side of the equation that you're on. But all right, Anthony, another one. You have to be dishonest to get rich. What has been your experience, and is that a factor in opinion?
I say that's definitely an opinion, and in fact, what I found, that opinion's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The people that I know who have hit financial freedom or who are quote unquote rich, most of them are the honest people I know.
Yeah.
And in fact, not only are they honest, but they're helpful. You know, like we had Luke Weber on a few podcasts ago.
Yeah.
He's helping people for giving some advice. Right.
Really,
and he's
really good advice.
Yeah. Really good. Those people that have gone through there and achieved their goals, most of them are helpful. They want other people to achieve their goals. And in fact, I think if you're continually dishonest, people aren't going to do business with you.
No.
You know, and that opinion reminds me from I forgot the name of the book. Oh, it's called Thou Shalt Prosper. Right, from Rabbi Lapin. And what he had talked about, a great book if you haven't checked it out. But what he talked about is the way that the Jewish people view money. And he goes into deep in that. And if you look, you look at the percentage of the population who are Jewish compared to, say, the top 500 wealthiest people, it's a disparity, right?
Yeah.
There's more, it's a bigger percentage than of the population. And he relates that to is because the way that they view money.
Yeah.
And he went through some of the opinions or the stereotypes. And one of them is that if they're doing it, they're there because they're dishonest. But really, if people were dishonest, it's gonna catch up with them. Like you might be able to get a couple deals, but eventually word's going to come out.
Yeah. And along the same lines, you have to be honest to get rich. And looking at some of the wealthiest people that I've met throughout my career and my life, is one of the common theme that I've noticed is that these people typically have a vision much bigger than just themselves. Mm-hmm. Right? They have a vision and they have a belonging to something bigger. A lot of them have huge hearts and they are very charitable at the end of the day. So that's a common theme that I've noticed through a lot of the really wealthy people as well. All right, Anthony, next one. Investing is risky. We've talked about this before, so maybe just touch on it just briefly.
Well, we think speculating is risky.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speculating is when you're not doing any research. And in fact, I even shared this article on Facebook over the weekend that they had a rat that is, I don't know exactly how this rat is trading cryptocurrency.
What?
And so he's doing a thing where he gets on the wheel and then it picks what they're going to buy or what this currency is. And then he goes on another thing and he determines if they're going to buy or sell it. And so somebody's been documenting this and the rat's killing it. Right, he's beating the S&P 500.
That's hilarious.
But the point, this rat is speculative. He's literally not. I mean, he doesn't have the capacity to do any research.
Maybe he's a genius.
It's just kind of, but doing that is risky,
mm-hmm.
right? But true investing is understanding what the returns will be and also what the pitfalls can be. And then when you know the downside, you can minimize that.
Yeah.
By either having resources or maybe insurance or designing the investment differently or maybe just not doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it where, I mean, there's always some level of risk, right? If we're turning over our money, but the more facts that you can find out and the more due diligence you can have, the less risky it's going to be.
Yeah, what I would add there is, again, I'm sure I mentioned this before, but when you look at somebody that's very successful in what they're doing, is they typically have it broken down to a very specific formula. A plus B equals C. If I buy a house at this price, put this much money into it, I can sell it for this price. And all they're doing once they figure that equation out is they're just doing it as many times as they possibly can in a year.
Mm-hmm. So
investing is not easy. Risky is certainly opinion. Now, Anthony, we've talked about some facts versus opinions. You and I have talked about this recently. Can you share a story of maybe the differences, how this is came to light in our practice, right? A fact versus opinion in regards to whole life and or IBC.
Well, part of it was that, well, again, we're continually going through Robert Kiyosaki's book, the cash flow quadrant, and he started talking about there. So that's where you and me started. I think that you brought it up to light, but then we have a case where an individual sold his company and was going to put it into a policy, and somehow he met with a certified financial planner, and he goes, no, don't do that. He said that he said guarantee. He goes, there's no guarantees in whole life. Like, to me, when I was speechless.
I could tell. Yeah, there was a
right?
little dead air there. Yeah.
I mean, that's what a whole life is, right?
Yeah.
Is the guarantee. And if any, what I was expecting him to say is, oh, that's a terrible investment, a terrible return. Now, that's an opinion. To say that there's no guarantee, that's just wrong.
Yes.
Wrong. And so, but fortunately, the client was astute enough to know. I mean, of course, I point out, you see this column here that says guarantee, right? This is a guarantee, a contract between you and the insurance company. This is what your cash value is going to be. This is what your death benefit is going to be. All you have to do is make the premiums, and the company is obligated to at least give you this. And then in addition, there's a potential for more with the dividends.
Yeah.
But, and I think where this goes into is, this is where we have to be very careful of where we're getting our opinions and facts from. Because if he didn't, I mean, this guy is a certified financial planner. You would think if he's saying something that if he says a fact, you would think that it truly is a fact. And in this case, it obviously wasn't. But, and you know what we encourage you to do is do your due diligence.
Yeah.
And that goes on us. Anything that we say here, any videos we do your own research, right? We want you to get educated. Don't just take our word for it.
Yeah.
You got to do your own diligence. Find out. Read that contract. Is there a guarantee in there? Or does it say 4%? Or, I mean, you have to do your own due diligence. And unfortunately, even people with initials after their name, even if they're a CPA, you still can't trust them, or trust but verify.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
I like that. Well said. Well said. Awesome. All right, let's move on. Let's look at a few more opinions and we'll wrap this thing up, Anthony. Another opinion that we often see out there in the financial realm is they have a big house, they must be rich. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll tell you, sometimes that's a slippery slope. I think we think they're rich, right? But how many clients have you seen who have the nice house, have the nice car, but they're one paycheck away from being homeless?
Yeah, and you could say that all the way up and down the spectrum, right, of kind of incomes there. So that's certainly an opinion.
Yeah, and to me, what I found out a lot of times, especially cars, to me, I think it's even more prevalent in cars. You see people, because, I mean, again, we could talk about a house. Is that an asset or liability? That's like its own separate podcast. But a car, that's definitely a liability.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is people who are trying to perceive that they're rich are going to buy those liabilities. They want to have that appearance that they have a nice car. But don't look what. And I try to tell my kids, don't evaluate somebody by their liabilities. Or if they have the Gucci belt or the Birka bag or the car, or they're going on all these trips, don't judge them on the liabilities they have. Judge them on the assets that they have.
Some of the wealthiest people I've met have been some of the most unassuming people as well. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right, got another one for you, Anthony. I didn't go to college, so I'll never get ahead.
Ooh, I tell you, I like this one.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is by far, that's definitely an opinion. And I think what's happened, times are changing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, how often have we heard, okay, go to college, get a job at a good company, and then they're going to take care of you.
Yeah.
None of that's true.
Nope.
Right. And I would even say with my daughter, I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast, but here's one thing I found interesting is now that some of her friends have gotten in, they graduated and they've gotten a first job.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, I know of a couple of them, their annual salary is in the 30s. Okay. Here's what that really hit me when she told me that, because I'm looking at when I went to college, and I know it was a wee bit ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But it was 10 grand. I got 4 years of school with books. Right. And my first job, I made 30 grand.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, I spent $1 and the first year I earned $3.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a good investment.
Yeah.
Okay. But school has gotten more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now school, I mean, Sarah went in-state. So it is a lot cheaper. But now it's more like 10 grand a year.
Yeah.
So now they're spending 40 grand.
10 grand a quarter.
Yeah. And they're still earning about the same amount as what I did a wee bit ago.
Yeah.
Right. So you landing a good job is not a given.
Mm-hmm.
And you also see these individuals gave up 4 years and they didn't earn much or probably anything. And if any, they spent money and then they're coming out and it's going to take them many years to make up what they had spent. And if you notice, there's the people going to college, it's less and less are going every year. But this is where it goes to what your goals are. I mean, most of the time why are people getting a job?
Earn an income.
Right. And a lot of them they're going to college to get a job.
Yeah.
Right. Where you're going to exchange your time for money. But what are we teaching on this podcast? What is Robert Kiyosaki teaching? It's you need your money to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You ain't going to learn that in college.
No.
Right. I do think college is a time where you have that. It's a pretty fun, cool time. Right. You have a lot of freedom with no responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. But then when you graduate, it totally flips. Right? So there's some value of growing up, getting exposed to some different people and some networking. But as far as educating goes, I think if you were to spend that 4 years, that 10 grand a year getting coaching or learning a business or buying a franchise, you would be much better off. But so there's so many ways for you to achieve your goals and be wealthy.
Yeah.
And college can be the route for some, but I don't think it's an end all be all.
Not at all.
Now, Cameron, why don't we switch this around a little bit?
Okay.
You're kind of grilling me.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk a little bit of a couple other opinions that we've heard. Whole life is terrible.
Number one, again, blanket statements are typically always an opinion, right? And so whole life is terrible is, man, again, I'm going to relate this back to kind of the way that I was introduced to infinite banking and whole life insurances. When I came across this, everybody kind of in my sphere all said that whole life insurance is terrible. And I remember having Nelson's book here in front of me with the facts, right? The book as he goes through and he talks about, hey, if you do this, this will happen. And so I would sit there and I would say, well, that's what this book says. Where do you get your information? And they say, well, I heard it from my mom. I heard it from my dad. I heard it from my investment guy, right? And so again, whole life insurance is absolutely an opinion. If you look at kind of what it satisfies and what it does for people, man, it's a guaranteed savings account, and you've got the ability to borrow against it for future investments. So
where I can, I think there's some truth here, because oftentimes whole life, I think, is misrepresented, right? And again, we talk about words are important. People are portraying whole life, your policy, as an investment. We don't treat it as an investment. We think it's savings.
Yeah.
Right. But that savings allows you to invest. And there's different ways to design it. We design it low death benefit, high cash value. The typical whole life policy is designed the opposite: high death benefit, low cash value. And there's places where that's the best design. But I think oftentimes the best design can be more of a high cash value. But I don't think it's all terrible. Sometimes it's in the way it's packaged, presented, and sold and designed is terrible.
Yeah.
But I think it's, if it was so terrible, would this product that's been around since the 1700s still be around?
And the answer is no. And if it was so terrible, would banks be buying it in the billions every single year? The answer is no.
Well said. Well said. Okay. Now, you may have heard this before. Paying cash is the best way to buy something.
I have heard that. And that's what I was told for a majority of my life. And it wasn't until I came across Nelson's book that it really, again, proved to me that paying cash was not the best option. And so for this one, I always recommend people read his book. And I never forget when I read page 45 of Nelson's book that, man, that actually made me mad. I'm sure I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I was really upset that nobody had ever taught me this before. I had saved up, I'd paid cash for investments, for cars, for vacations. And the very last thing that I'd done is saved up for a house and used the money for a big down payment. And very shortly after, I realized that that is not the most efficient way to do it. And the most efficient way to do it is to collateralize it inside your life insurance policy.
Well, let's take this a step further. Why is that? What's it down? I mean, what are they missing when somebody says, well, you should pay cash for this car or this asset? Like, where are they wrong?
Well, wouldn't say, okay, so what I'd say this is they're not wrong. Like, you can do that and you can be just fine, right? It's like the same advice I would say that when people typically ask about Dave Ramsey and why we have different advice from him, is that you could certainly follow Dave Ramsey advice and you would be fine. Like, that advice is very safe. You're not going to get in trouble by following Dave Ramsey's advice. But I'll tell you what, it's not the best, right? There is a better way to do it. And so you do have to be a little bit more control oriented, right? To understand why you wouldn't want to do that. And so paying cash is not the best, because when you're using those dollars, is they stop earning for you. So the moment I take money out of my checking account, savings account, or wherever it is, and I spend it, not only do I lose that compound interest this year, but I lose it every year moving forward. And so by just simply storing cash inside the policy, borrowing against it, now I've got my cash still sitting there earning and compounding and growing inside of my policy. So, right, again, as I hate saying anything super wrong or anything there, but, there's a better way to do it than paying cash.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes to, like, should I pay off my house? I mean, it depends. It's never a bad idea.
Yeah.
But rarely is it the best idea. Right. Okay. How about this one? IBC doesn't work.
Obviously, that's an opinion, right? Is we've done the math, right? Is we talk about this all the time. Is we've got videos inside of our course about how infinite banking works, and we're utilizing and relying on the financial stability of very large mutual insurance companies on the performance of the policy. And literally all we're doing is borrowing against that cash value and then buying another safe, secure asset. And so when you look at it, it does work, and we've proved it time and time again.
What I would say is, we'll add to that, is IBC is a concept, right? If somebody says it doesn't work, I kind of want to say they're an idiot, but I don't.
I was being PC. Yeah, I was going to call some names too.
But they're flat out wrong. Now, is IBC the best strategy? That's an opinion, right? But to say it doesn't work, you're stating it as a fact. Like it definitely works. And again, these policies have been around since the 1700s. These insurance companies have all been that we use have all over 100 years or older.
Yeah.
So this system does work without a question. Whether this is for you or not, that's something that you need to decide.
Yep.
And let me remind people is that you mentioned we did the math, right? So we're going to put a link in the show notes where we did the math on buying a rental property with cash, like using a savings account, or what if you use a policy loan, right? It's really all about how much cash we have at the end of the day. When people say, buying cash is best or paying off the house is best, they're only looking at part of the equation. We got to look at the whole equation, and that's what we've done.
Yep.
And in fact, let's also put in a link to the video we have. Should I have a 15 or 30-year mortgage?
Okay.
Right. Okay. What's next, Cam?
I think we're done. We're wrapping this thing up, right? We just talked about how most people's lives are determined by the opinions rather than facts. And so what we've done is we've tried to highlight some of those opinions that are common out there and provide some support and some facts, at least point you in the direction where you can find some resources. And then obviously just a recommendation, do your own due diligence, right? Is don't take somebody's word for fact. Go out there and do your own research and find out exactly how things work.
Yeah, and Todd Lankford has a great saying, compared to what? Like and he used it when somebody says, well, whole life is a terrible place to put your money. Compared to what? Or do the math. What else are you going to do? But you can put this into anytime somebody says, this is terrible investment. Compared to what?
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times I hear, like this example is coming to me. And when we talk about like the 15 like different types of real estate.
Yeah.
One thing that was surprised to me when we did that webinar was the amount of the low rent received on medical buildings or offices. But the reason you look at the numbers, well, the typical rent's going to be much less compared to, say, a normal business office. But the reason being, those medical offices have a much lower turnover, a much lower risk. Like I know, for example, like with my son's pediatrician, I mean, Chad is 28, right? His pediatrician is still in the same office.
Yeah.
Right. So that, I don't know what the leases were, but you have that medical building, since your turnover is going to be low, your risk is low. So the numbers are going to look a little bit less. But does that mean it's a terrible investment? I mean, if you compare it to maybe another commercial building that has higher numbers, but that's because there's higher risk.
Yeah.
Right. We got it compared to what I think is a great great question. And he also says, if something's a good or bad, or something too good to be true, ask questions. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen that and I've walked away from the investment, but it turned out to be just like they said. But the problem is I didn't believe them because I was just looking at my internal opinions.
Yeah.
What I should have did is look at the facts.
So doing your homework, right? One of the things that I think we've kind of addressed as we wrap this up here is that most people are typically in financial trouble today because they've taken too many shortcuts and have made their decisions based upon opinions rather than facts. Would you agree with that?
Totally.
Yeah. There aren't any shortcuts to becoming wealthy, right? You got to do the work. You got to take your time. You got to do your own due diligence.
Well said, Cam.
Awesome. Let's wrap this up.
Let's do it.
Perfect. Enjoy this episode.
Make it a fantastic day.
Take care.